So, Michelle, welcome to Girl Take the Lead. It's so fun to have you join us. Here we are kicking off 2024.
Thank you for
Just,
having me,
it's a
Yolanda.
great way to start. I think this whole happiness topic is just a wonderful way to look into 2024. So, you want to start by just telling our audience a little bit about who you are and about your book?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. And it is, Yolanda, a great time of year because what I've done with this book is I've combined happiness and habits. And this is the time of year when everybody is, I don't know, making resolutions or setting goals. And instead of doing that, what are your habits? Habits are the things we do that don't require energy. So in the book, I ask people to look at their habits mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And what the research on my positive psychology is my background. All the research shows that when people do things for themselves in each of those categories, they feel better,
Mm.
right? They're happier. And the other thing that we talk about in the book is coping skills. Happier people don't have perfect lives, they just have better coping skills. So it is a great time of year to talk about happiness, habits, coping skills, and the things that keep us resilient.
Right. Because I think we're all looking at when we think about the future, we definitely have hope, right, for a good life, and certainly happiness is probably at the top of our list to look at and go, yeah, I just want to be happier in 2024. So there are so many great things. I mean, you have like over 40 habits or something in the
Yeah.
book, right? And so I wish we could cover all of them, but we won't. What are some of your favorites that come to mind for you?
Yeah, the book was really there. These are habits that I've accumulated over the years. I call myself a living test woman. Every time I hear something, I try it on. And then if it works, I want to share it with the world. So, one of the top habits that I love is thinking is a habit. The way you process events is a habit. I think a lot of times when we think of habits, we think of bad habits, smoking, eating too much, drinking. It's dry January. But I really want people to realize that how they think is a habit. And what's so fascinating in the positive psychology research is they've shown that optimists and pessimists look at the same event very differently.
Mhm.
So if perceived negative event happens to a pessimist, they think it's universal and bad luck always follows them.
Right.
Where an optimist will think it's specific, right? And something that, is temporary. So it's very interesting to look at the research. And what I love about the research is happiness and optimism can be learned. They're learnable skills.
Mhm. So when we look at some of those habits, which one comes when you're out and working with your clients and talking with people? Which one comes up the most often?
Yeah, that's also similar. It's the softening of our language around our life. We've become in our society sometimes very cynical and apathetic, and and we kind of go, we're living the dream, and we use broad terms like always and never. So it's when someone comes to me and says, "I can never get it right." It's like,
Mhm.
let's soften that. You're learning to get better.
Right.
Right. So it's these absolute terms. And again, the way we talk about what's happening in our lives, the story we're telling, which is the most important story all of us are telling, the story of our own lives, we tend to be very absolute and sometimes negative, and we don't even realize it. And we think we're being funny, right? It's comedic effect, right?
Yeah. So what made you write the book? How did you get to this point?
Thank you for asking. I mean, this is a lifelong progress. Early in my 20s, I just wanted to be healthy. So I started working out and I learned how to eat well. And then once I got that kind of going and working, I found the self-help section and I started reading about my thoughts. And then, it was like so physical, and then it was spirituality, finances, everything. I just kept adding habits one at a time, very slowly, right? In the book, I tell people to pick one thing and do it for 90 days
Mhm.
and then pick another thing. And at the end of 5 years, you will have accumulated 20 habits. That's a lot. However, people try to do things really quickly all at once. So it's slow and steady. And when I started accumulating these habits, when I went through my own, divorce and, financial crisis in 2008, I realized it was these habits that kept me strong and sane. And
Mhm.
that's another thing about optimists. One area of your life could be going wrong, but you're able to separate it from the other areas. Where a pessimist tends to let one negative event affect everything else. So I was still working out. I had a great support system. I had good music on my playlist. I was reading books that uplifted me. And it was these things that were air to me that even in the midst of terrible heartbreak and financial, I don't want to say it's
Mhm.
not ruin, isn't the word, but that's what's coming to me. But we had the 2008, market crash. I was able to stay as positive as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think most of us, the common sense about that is, oh, people are born that way,
Yeah.
right? They're either pessimistic or an optimist. But it's so good when you bring up the point that it can be learned.
Yeah, that was so exciting for me. I to this day remember I was reading Dr. Martin Seligman's work in a coffee shop. And when I started reading it, because I've always been a believer without the research. And then when I started, I was like, yes, someone actually has research that shows that you can practice the way you just, explain events. In my book, I call it the optimistic spin, right? Can you give an optimistic spin to, and I'm such a pro at it because I've been practicing, right? It's a muscle that during COVID, when everything started, people were panicking. I too panicked in the beginning because it was very unknown, but very quickly I gained my footing again and I started posting energy shift hours, I call them. Right? Bring me your fears, bring me what you're anxious about, bring me and then let's shift the way we look at it. Can't change what's happening,
Right.
can change how we look at it. And then that gives you palpable relief in your body.
Uh-huh. I love that idea of perception, that, and most of us think that reality, there's a reality, right? And there's a, it's kind of almost a stoic way of being. But when we see ourselves as, different perspectives, people have different perspectives, it does broaden us and open us up so we can take more things in. One of the things I loved about one of the habits you put in there was make time to play.
Yeah.
That was really good. And we've covered play on on a couple of our episodes, but what's your sense of that? I mean, I think sometimes we think play is like an all or nothing thing. And one of the things I think that we can do is look at it in almost increments. Like maybe it's not
Yeah.
100%, right? But
Well, what brings you joy? What brings you enjoyment? And I always like to say we don't take our play serious enough. And as much as, working out or biking or hiking, our forms of play, we've gotten so crazy with our Fitbits and our counting our steps that we're losing the joy of just laying on the grass and looking at the clouds. I love to color. I literally have a little bag of markers, all different color markers. I bring it with me everywhere I go in my journal. It's almost fun to watch me on an airplane take up my little colors. And I just start to color. And sometimes I host in my house coloring and conversation. So it's really, what brings you joy. So it's thinking about, the things that you just like to do when you were a kid. And, vision boards, I'm doing a vision board class. There's something fun about just crafting. So again, these are my things that I
yeah,
love. So I
yeah,
ask people, what are the things you like to do? And are you doing them? Because sometimes we're just adulting too much.
yeah,
And it's just that, laying on the grass, looking at the clouds, taking your shoes off, whatever it is, running through a sprinkler. I don't know what, riding a
yeah, yeah,
bicycle, they all just make you feel young again.
yeah. I think sometimes we think it has to be like a structured sport. One of the things that Brene Brown says is, make it an unstructured time with yourself. And when I first heard that, I went, unstructured. Wow. And then she went on to talk about that she's found the happiest people in life are those that goof off
Yeah.
and have fun, you know. And I went, oh, I see what she's talking about
Yeah.
as unstructured. You know, I
There's
figured
an
it
art
was
studio here that we go
yeah.
to with my friends too, and it's like, what do they she call it? She calls it adult creativity camp. And we
That's
go and it's
great.
just there's colored pencils, there's watercolors, there's all kinds of mediums, and you just
Yeah.
do it's unstructured play, right? Do whatever you want for the time you're
Yeah,
here.
yeah. Yeah, I like to do card making and well, my podcast to me is sort of my creative outlet. I never know what's going to happen with it. So
But you
it
probably get lost in making the cards and I'm
oh yeah, definitely, definitely. Um, I also thought, okay, this one got me. Listen to audiobooks in the shower.
yeah, I just had fun with that one when I was writing the book because I, you know, in the bathroom usually an hour every morning anyway, right? Taking a shower, doing my hair, my makeup, whatever it is I'm doing,
Yeah.
right? Getting ready, picking my clothes out. So I just put a speaker in the bathroom years ago and I started listening to books while I'm I'm getting ready in the morning. So that's why I kind of was having fun with that. But people will say to me, I don't have time to read a book.
Hmm.
And you could get a book on Audible, right? You could listen to a podcast like this. And if you bring a speaker into a shower, right, you're in there
Yeah.
anyway. Or so it's finding an activity where you're there anyway, whether it's taking a walk or driving in your car. I kind of had fun. I just said, and I like to the other the other habit I have in there is every morning do something that inspires, motivates, or educates you.
Mhm.
So it kind of goes into the audiobooks in the shower as well.
Yeah, yeah. That was so cute though when I went, "Oh," because I know my oldest, Emma, does that where she'll listen to Dateline episodes in the
Yeah.
shower or some kind of true crime podcast. And okay, how about have a bad day emergency plan? I think that could be very helpful to a lot of us.
Yeah, it's kind of like that lifeline, the phone a friend piece. I have a group of people we call the village, and we're on a group text. There's probably four of us for the last 20 years. And it's like that lifeline that if we need someone, we need support or we need advice or we have a question, it's also having a good playlist. When I used to have it, when I was going through my divorce, I made a playlist called Stay Strong Girl. And I just played that playlist over and over.
Yeah.
So it's having a movie, like I have certain movies I like to watch, The Holiday with Queen Latifah, so it's what's that one thing that's going to help you get through your bad day, right?
Uh-huh.
The bad days are going to happen, but having, whether it's a journal, going out for a walk, just having a group of things that you could pick from choice.
Yeah. I like it. I like when you talk about it as an emergency plan because you don't know when you're going to have a bad day,
Yeah.
right? It can come from, just going out. Well, I think sometimes it's just our energy and where we're coming from and where our vibration is and how low it's getting and how we can lift the vibration back up a little bit.
Well, really,
Yeah.
I love what you're saying, Yolanda. It's knowing, right, that if you're attracting, I had a bad day last week. We had a terrible storm here on Long Island. So I had to go to a client in Massachusetts and my ferries were canceled. And I was literally walking out the door and the shoes that I was planning to wear the next 3 days caught in the door and the heel broke.
Oh no.
And it was just one of those, and it's like, okay, I'm allowed a bad day, but I know at the end of the day, I have to read something that inspires me, talk to someone who lifts me up, and I think the day will be over and I get it, tomorrow's a new day, right? So
Yeah.
not to beat yourself up and to realize that, it's one day, but don't let
Yeah.
it become 2 days and 3 days and
Right. And I think what you're saying is, get it out of your system. And my youngest daughter, Kiki, a lot of the listeners know her, had a real bad cold. And I knew her energy was really zapped. And she said, I'm going to just going to make a quick run to the drugstore and get some NyQuil so I can sleep at night. I'm like, oh my God, the mother is going nuts. She has a flat tire
Oh, yeah.
and she had to go handle the flat tire. And then it was just one of those things where I just really felt for her, and it wouldn't it be great if you did have a box on the wall and you broke it in case of emergency and you
Right.
pulled it out and there's your list. Okay.
But it's realizing, I think you're onto something there. It's making the connection, right? I always say every thought is electromagnetic unit of energy that collects another similar thought and another. So if you're already having a bad day, you're like, oh, woe is me, I feel bad. And you don't realize that you're corkscrewing your way down the emotional ladder where, yes, if you're sick and a flat, those are things I would be upset about, but then
Yeah.
making the decision that tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's what people don't do. Whatever they go to bed at night thinking this is a bad day. They sleep on all the bad energy. And the minute they wake up in the morning, they're in a bad mood already. So
Yeah.
it's kind of realizing that when you go to sleep, you're going to disconnect from that chain of thoughts, the momentum of all those negative things. And that when you wake up in the morning, you have a fresh start
Oh, that's
and
super
not letting
important.
too many days pile up. So it's these habits of thinking, of gratitude, of breaking the chain of negative thoughts.
Well, and I think sometimes what happens too, right? Especially when we're in a job and something happens, like there's a layoff.
Yeah.
And, I know that I know Kiki and I talked because there was something that happened at her job similar to that. And I tried to help her see that the picture was bigger, right, than just how she was feeling for the people that got laid off, which was, important. And I said, you have a choice. You can stay there or you can leave. You can look for something else. You have a choice on how all of this gets handled. But I think what can happen, and I definitely had this happen in my life, where I just kept piling on, like, oh, this is a bad place to work,
And
right?
that's what we don't realize. It's separating and realizing that we always have more control than we think. And it's not the situation, it's how we look at it. There's a great quote from the Midnight Library. He says, the prison isn't the place, it's the perspective.
Mm,
And if I choose to stay in this company, and it's very wise counsel you're giving your daughter, and she's young, I would assume she's young, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
I've been around a long time, so many people I know have been downsized, shuffled around, reorged. They're all fine. They all have great positions. They all figured it out. So you realize that, yes, it still hurts, right? The emotions are real, but you don't want to. I always say, if you're in a bad mood, that's a bad mood. But if it's 2 days in a row, 3 days, then it becomes your temperament, right?
right.
And then like you said, you pile it on and pile it on until you're just a grumpy person, or you're a negative
Yes.
person, or you're a
Yeah.
complaining person, right? Because you're not able to stop the momentum. So really wise counsel that you gave her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we talked a lot about thinking habits, but there's also the habit of, so mental habits are the thinking. Then you have emotional habits, which are your relationships. So, what are your habits around the relationship with people in your life? What is your relationship with yourself? Everything in your life is a relationship. We have a relationship with our food, with our cars, right? So it's realizing that we're cultivating these relationships. And the more I cultivate a good relationship with myself, with my parents, my siblings, my husband, my kids, whatever it is. So it's emotional habits, relationships. Then you have spiritual habits. And the other thing in the positive psychology research, which I love, is they studied levels of happiness. And at the bottom level of just happiness is pleasure, right? Living the good life. I'm drinking champagne. I'm getting my nails done. I have card night. We're going on vacations. The next level up the happiness scale is when you're in flow, right? And I know you know this, when you're just having so much fun, you're just engaged. All your senses are engaged in the moment and time flies.
Mhm.
But then the third level of happiness is doing something you love for meaning something bigger in the world, right? That you're contributing to something
Mhm.
bigger,
Mhm.
right? So again, the spirituality and looking at that through that lens, saying, as are my actions connected to something greater than me?
Yeah.
Is it just about me? Right? Because when it's about helping other people, again, your level of happiness increases. So I said mental, physical, and physical, right? So just simple things. I always say, just like moving your body and drinking water. Your body's, 70, 80% water. So it's realizing that the habits you have around your body, you don't have to feel old. I always say, you probably know an 80-year-old that has more energy than a 20-year-old, and a 20-year-old that has no energy. So
Yes.
it's, where does this energy come from? It comes from the way they're living, the way they're thinking, the way they're processing. So to me, looking at those habits, and then I always tease in my classes, I always say you could take a walk in the woods with a loved one and you hit all four. So it's not as if you have to do four different things.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
lots of different habits. And I just ask people to look, you could buy the book, it's 44 habits, and then you pick which ones work for you.
Yeah. Well, and I think when it comes to our listeners who are probably working, this is super helpful to help them see, some of the habits that you just get into, some of the routine that you just keep doing over and over again. And it can lead to such burnout.
Yeah, and that's a big thing to me with the working is, everybody knows take a break, go outside, but they don't do it.
Yeah.
So what I'm working on in my next book, which I love, is what happened with the first book is when I really started practicing being mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally creating these habits, I found my energy got higher and my optimism got higher. And I started having what I called magic carpet days where everything clicked, right? The right people.
Mhm.
The Uber driver was great. People were nice to me. I just was like, I love these magic carpet days. So what I realize is it's like, I call it setting the table. So if it's a holiday and what holiday we just had, Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah. So on a holiday, you set the table for your family because you're anticipating a good day. You put out nice china, you put out lovely napkins, maybe a centerpiece. Nobody's there yet, but you're anticipating it's going to go well. So I want people to set the table for their day. What kind of day do
Mm.
you want to have? So when you set the table or you do something in the morning before you go to work, you get that energy, your energy is lifted. So when you get there, things are easier. The
Right.
athlete would call it the flow state,
Mhm.
right? And then realizing you might get to work and get an email and boom, you're off course.
Right.
But that's okay, knowing how to get yourself back there and knowing at work, I like to call it my Einstein brain, knowing when I'm just flowing, ideas are coming and things are clicking, and knowing when I'm putting sweat equity in versus flow equity. It's very
Mm.
different. So helping people realize at work, they still have a choice. And lastly, I'll say one of the biggest things for people, employed is taking control of your calendar.
Yeah.
We let too many people, we don't mind our calendar, and then we wonder why, we're
Yeah.
so stressed.
Yeah. Well, I think you also talked about affirmations somewhere in the book too,
Yes.
right? About that's got to help us a little bit. I know I'm pretty bad with them. I don't I'm surrounded by all, Katieisms and all of these wonderful things from Hay House. And, you know, I'm,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to have that kind of feeling around me. I've got my candles. I've got, aromatherapy going on with, with the flowers.
It all works. It all
It
helps.
does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It just keeps us lifted, I think, what you're
And the
talking about.
affirmations, call them whatever, mantra, the word mantra I love comes from, I think it's Sanskrit for mind vehicle. It's a vehicle for your mind. So what I like to tell my clients is when you find yourself having a bad day, you want to have a couple affirmations to pull yourself back. Right. And I say to myself, I am radiant, I am in demand, I am courageous, I'm a money magnet, I'm unstoppable. Those 5 affirmations I've been saying since 1997. I haven't changed them, but I love the last one that says, reminds me I'm unstoppable.
Oh,
So
I
when I
love
get
that.
knocked down, when I feel like I didn't do it right, it's like, you know what? It's okay. You're unstoppable. So shake it off and we'll be okay.
And for our listeners, don't worry, I'll put that in the show notes so that you can, because that was really good, Michelle, about your affirmations, what you had. Because I think, there we don't, or perhaps not as perhaps on the mark sometimes with some of them. Like we play a little too small, we want to play bigger. And I think your visions come with those affirmations of yourself being bigger.
Yeah, I'm really a believer that we are creating our life with our thoughts, and our words are, they're very powerful. So, if you got in your car and there was a song on the radio you didn't like, you wouldn't think twice about changing the station. You would just
Right.
do it in a second. But yet we beat ourselves up in our mind all day long instead of, deciding to say something nicer to ourselves, something kinder, something that
Exactly.
supports us.
That's so good. How do you think writing the book and then having your business, how it's all changed your life?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to it earlier. Writing the book kind of makes you the poster child, right? So we're happiness. So that's, first of all, I'm not happy all the time. I'm a regular human and I have, normal ups and downs. But I feel it does make you own it more. So it forced me to stay on track more, when I was having and that's the funny part. I posted a video on Instagram the other day. I was having a bad day, and another podcast I was recently on had just aired. So it just published. So I listened to it and I was laughing because I was like, I need to take my own advice. Like sometimes you don't even take your own advice. And the advice was, Michelle, you're the only one inside your head. You're the boss of you. So take control, right? Girl, take the lead, right? Take
Yeah.
control back. So I laughed at that. So it's a constant reinforcement, which again also led me to having, I call it again, these magic carpet days where things are easier. So many people are, I call them huffers and puffers. They're struggling and pushing, and there is another way to live. And that's what the book has really taught me. When you really slow down, take time for yourself, everything works out,
Yeah.
right? It happens naturally versus you forcing it.
Mhm.
And it's just a sweeter, I think, for me, it was a sweeter way to live. So the book forced me to own it and live it, which then, brought me to the next level. And now the new lessons, there's always
Yes.
more
Yes. And
lessons.
now would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about your new book, the book you're working on, and then,
Yeah,
how they can follow you and reach you?
thank you, Yolanda. The book coming out in the next 90 days, I'm going to say it out loud, is all about energy. You are an emotional being, so your emotions are energy. And it's all about teaching people how to manage their energy up and down, like we talked about. All your emotions are good, but what happens is people, when they're having a bad day, so imagine a depressed person has no energy, like can't get out of bed. And then the top of the energy spectrum is joy, exuberance. So a person that has no energy wants to jump from depression to joy. And it
Mhm.
doesn't work that way, which is why we sometimes drink, take pills, eat, shop, whatever the things we do to make ourselves feel better. And I want to teach people how to just walk themselves, ladder up like a step on a ladder, just one rung at a time, right? What's another thought that'll make you feel a little relief in your body, a little bit better? And then you take the next step. And then you realize that your emotions are simply energy and information. And what you're thinking and believing is affecting how you're feeling. So, in a nutshell, that's what the new book is about. It's a little bit of science, a little bit of metaphysics, and I'm really looking forward to getting it out there.
Wow. Please consider coming on the podcast
I would
again when
love
that's
to.
out
Yeah.
there. So good. Um, is there any, we've talked a lot about your lessons, but is there anything else you want to share with our listeners before we end?
The biggest thing, I think I said it earlier, is everyone has more power than they think, right? And sometimes you just need one person to tell you, girl, take the lead, right? You've got this, you can do this. And then you go, oh, like we need each other.
Yeah.
We're here to lift each other up. So I think the biggest thing is to ask for help, have your circle of people that are gonna, support you, your village, And, you could find it in a book, you can find it in a person, but there's definitely people out there that want to cheer you on.
Yeah. Well, how about we end? I mean, I love Marianne Williamson. And when you had her, Our Deepest Fear in your book, I just said, oh, can we read that again? Do
Yeah.
you mind reading it
Okay.
for us?
No, I have my book here. So
Yay.
I have the page here. I'm trying to get around the microphone here. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconditionally, unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Yeah, that so resonated with me.
Yeah. That's such a good place to end. So thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to your next book and wish you all the happiness in the world.
Thank you so much for having me, and put where you can reach me in the show notes so people
I
can.
sure will.
Thank you, Yolanda.
Okay.